the one whose candidate had lost. And here I'm like on the opposing side, apparently, is the candidate who won appointed me to the governing body of COF. So it's like this intense, like I was trying to maintain a state of union in COF because there was so much animosity, and it all came to a point inside of myself, and it all seemed to fuse, you know? And there were like 3 words that came to me as like what humanity has to sort of experience over the next eon, maybe. And they were union, reconciliation, and fusion, as if there are these opposing forces in ourselves, these pairs of opposites that we need to learn to reconcile. You know, and once we do, it can fuse. This doesn't mean like a life of mortification and renouncement. It means accepting who we are and what we really want to do, and it's okay. You know, there's a lot of like sort of repressive tendencies in Western civilization and in the patriarchal culture and things like that, which, as good as COF is, it has some of that stuff. So I've been having to deal with that as well. So, you know, I don't want to dominate this conversation. But...
Adam, I'm really intrigued with this because it so parallels an experience I had this winter. And just hearing you talk about it, it absolutely underlines my own experience, where it's indescribable. There's no, you know, as soon as you start talking about it, it sounds extremely grandiose. and yet you can't deny what has happened. And also, the thing that frustrated me so much is there's no place to talk about it. I can't go to my church and say, oh, guess what happened to me? Craig, I invited to be part of a group that I called, for want of a better moniker, a council of elders, just a group of people who are concerned about me, who could monitor me, because I felt the same way you did. I had people that were alarmed and thought, you know, I was going off the deep end. In fact, I bought myself a straitjacket just to you know, put in the front room of I'm an artist and I have a studio here, and I just put it in the front room to say, okay, you know, anybody that wants to can come in here and declare me crazy. Here's my straitjacket. Now what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? And I'm totally with you. There's this movement that we have to move humanity forward. We have to evolve, and we are at this critical juncture where we're either going to extinct ourselves, or we are going to evolve. Those are the only 2 options. And I'm just really eager to hear what happens next. In fact, I had exactly the same experience that I thought, well, I've got to go get a doctorate at Pacifica.
Oh no. Amazing.
Yeah. Because what else do you do?
Yeah.
You know? I'm really eager to hear what you've been working on. What are your ideas? How do we create a community that is able to absorb this kind of thing and to work on new ideas and to move forward? What do you think?
Yeah, I love that, because, you know, one of the things that happened to me, I've always been a very creative person, but in the community, it was not encouraged. So part of what happened was this explosion of like music and art and poetry, you know, which has been coming out with really archetypical stuff. And Tim, I know that, you know, because of the meeting last time, it was mentioned that you're an artist. So I went to your website, and yeah, you know, I would love to explore this further, and I want to, and I feel like it's necessary, because I felt the exact same thing. Like, this stuff happened during the period of Indigenous Peoples Day, and it sounds like so vain, you know, glorious, but it's like I felt exactly the same thing, that we're on the edge of a precipice, that because of the way that, I don't want to exteriorize it too much because it's in me too, but it's like this Western colonial patriarchal culture, which has sidelined indigenous ways of relating to the world, destroyed them. This is not theoretical stuff. It's an incredible trauma that has occurred for people. And unfortunately, I feel like we've really lost our connection to the earth, you know? And that's like the generative sacred feminine. So like, how do we get that back? And I don't want to appropriate, you know, native cultures. At the same time, I feel like I need to connect with them. So like, who can I talk to? Because I really want to talk, you know, like one of the things that I perceived was like the sun dance is something that can happen in a person's heart. You don't have to have an exterior ritual for that. But you know, who do I talk to about that? I would love to talk to a Native American elder about that because I feel like I need to connect. But how? You know, so again, the Pacifica thing, maybe that could get me in contact with people. Or
go ahead, Stuart. Did you? Oh, there you go. All right, Stuart, you're still muted. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm very interested in hearing this because, you know, it resonates so closely with my journey as well. I had these experiences, you know, which was the beginning of my process, set me on a path. But over the years, I mean, they have continued. I've had many experiences of similar type transcendent experiences. But over the years, I suppose one of the things that I realized was that we can, you know, we can move inwards with them, or we can move outwards with them. And there's a want to go out into the world and help the world and save the world and do all of that. And I agree with that. That's a natural empathic response to what we see out there when we begin to see it. But also to work inwardly with these experiences is perhaps more valid, because sharpening the knife, okay, or sharpening the needle, you know, people do not know what this means until they begin to sharpen their own needle or their own knife. And then they begin to realize, my God, look at where I was and look at where I am after that piece of work or that period of process. And the process continues and the sharpening continues in an ever refining type of polishing the stone, polishing the stone, polishing the stone. And more qualities begin to emerge into ourselves. And that inspires us to act on out into the world. Now, if we sort of take the distraction of going out into the world perhaps too soon, well then the energy is to my mind being spent in the wrong direction. We have to learn to contain this within ourselves and allow the process to complete itself to some extent, so that we then begin to see what is necessary and what is not necessary in terms of our actions in the world. You see, so I think it's very wise to have a space where people can share about these experiences. I think that's hugely needed, but I think it's a very specific space. It would need to be a private space, not perhaps one exactly like this, which is open to all, and to have certain sort of guidelines placed around it, so that there's sort of an ongoing respect of people's individual stories as they share those stories in. And also, you know, by virtue of everybody responding, me responding, there's also a therapeutic element that's going to naturally emerge within a group like that. So there needs to be certain sort of, you know, perhaps loose guidelines around what way a group like that works. You know, what is the purpose of it? Just having like for the group to have its own sense of purpose, I think would be very, very important. But I think you're introducing something, because the more you speak about these type of experiences, the more you're going to find that people have had them and that they don't know really what to do with them. Because, you know, I've gone on a search of all different philosophies over the years, to find out and to try to understand what it was that happened and what is it that's happening. And that's still going on. And the discovery, uncovery is still occurring. The development of myself with myself is still occurring. So, you know, I think we need to take the culture out of it and put the individual into it and see it as an individual journey rather than a journey to go out and heal a country or heal a nation or heal the world, which I think is more of an acting out, perhaps too soon. Because just one more thing, and then I'll stop on this. I feel that when energy is ready, it will create its own response. We don't need to push anything. It will naturally open its own door and flow in whatever direction it needs to flow in. It's not our choice.
Okay.
So
Um,
that would be my piece on it.
yes. Can I also share something? I'm not going to share my experience as such, but I did have some experience, and I always said to myself, when can I share this experience? Because there is a sort of a secret. It's like a secret you don't want to share. And this secret is it's so intimate. It's so personal, and along with it is come also a wounding of the ego. So it's not necessarily just an inflation as such. It's more of the wounding. It's a defeat of some sort. But a few days ago, I had a dream, which, you know, because I always ask myself, can I talk about these experiences and so on? And in my dream, I was in a seminar room and I was cleaning the floor. And I was cleaning the floor because I was making ready for Dalai Lama to come and speak, basically. And so I'm not saying I am Dalai Lama, but it was a green light for me, you know. So it was a green light for me to talk about, because in Buddhism, we talk about pure consciousness, and everyone has all this different meaning and so on, but this union with the divine as such, it's it's a wounding of the ego. And there's a great lecture on it, by Edward Edinger, called The Encounter with a Greater Personality, on YouTube. And that was quite helpful for a start. But other poetry, I don't know if you read Rumi's poetry, in which that's what yeah. And so these people, you know, so this is nothing new, like the union of the divine. It's always been happening. And the thing is that it's so weird that, you know, out there in other parts of the world is such a, like, yeah, okay, so like, you know, but here it's just so repressed, it's just so taken away from us. And so it's sad to see, but it's nice to see it, more and more people are coming out.
And just say one thing, just based on what everybody said, is when the Buddha sat for 7 days at the still point, he then stood up and looked at the place where he had sat for 7 days, relating and integrating, relating and integrating. You know, he's bringing it down to the level of the body, you know. And the other image of the obsidian stone, Marie-Louise von Franz has this, where there's a bear who is smoothing the obsidian stone, and he's doing it, smoothing out the stone, based on the turmoil of relating to the outer world. I mean, this was the symbol to her of we all smooth our stone by our relatedness to the outer world, you know. And I had a kind of event this morning, not this morning, this week, where I did a I Ching on it because it was kind of disturbing. And the I Ching said that if you turn, you get the bigger revelation by not leaving the turmoil of the world. If you leave the turmoil of the world, then you it's sort of, well, what's the difference between being and becoming? I mean, that was something we had this morning. discussing, that being and becoming are there's the systole and diastole. It's the introversion, and then there's embracing the whole world. And there has to be this rhythm, but it's the relating and integrating, relating and integrating. But anyway, yeah, this is a big topic. I mean, we can we can discuss this other stuff next week if you guys want to keep talking about it. And Jordy and Jan and everybody, feel free to jump in as well.
I want to respond to a little of what Stuart was talking about, the individual situation versus the collective situation. And in my experience, so much of my sense of responsibility has to do with the collective. And I agree with you, Stuart, that we don't want to jump too early. We don't want to take it out into the world too early. And I also am feeling this mounting crisis that needs an immediate response. And so much of my own experience was kind of a conflict between the individual and the collective. And I feel very much like I don't need so much integration personally as I need to be part of the integration of the collective. That there's something about all of us that we have this creative capacity, and together we can create something that moves evolution forward. So I don't know, I just feel like both of those are happening at once, and then we need to respond to both of them.
We have to be in harmony with the Tao, though, before we can bring harmony to the outer world, I think is what Stuart is saying. That's the sort of the Rainmaker story. If we go out to the outer world to heal the outer world, and we're not in harmony with the Tao, then I don't know what happens. What would that?
Greg.
Yeah, go ahead.
My response to that, yeah, Tim, absolutely is what I would say to you on that. And also, when I look out into the world and I see the great need in the world, who is it that's seeing? Who is it that's experiencing the disruption? So to take this inner experience and bring its qualities out into the outer world to satisfy who? My sense of anxiety, my sense of grief, whereas to hold it that little bit longer and to work on it, work with it, let it work on me, is sharpening the needle. But in the beginning, I didn't even know that process could happen. I've had the blowout experience. My awareness is inflated with this experience, and I want to act. I suddenly have the power of seeing. I suddenly have the power of feeling more deeply. And there's a natural want to go in the direction that I've always gone with, to become the parent, to become the savior, to become the facilitator, the helper, and to use it in that way. But in a sense of having a group of elders, well, you know, you listen to each voice, and my voice would be definitely saying, who is it that actually needs to be saved? When we see the world and we experience that sort of pain, whose pain is it?
Something like, you know, there is the, I just tell you, I think that this is, everyone is, this is a felt sense that everyone has. But one thing in China, in times of prosperity, everyone's a Confucian, and in times of poverty, everyone's a Taoist, you know. And so there is this sense of, in Taoism, it's called Wu Wei, you know, where they will, if they want to remove a big obstacle from a stream, the Taoist says, well, wait 400 years, it will go away of itself. Where the Confucian is going to get a great big thing and move it out. So it is the difference between using resonance and using direct action. There's a wonderful story I think I've told before where Nicodemus, who's mentioned in the book of John, had this vision of a burning tree. This is an alchemical tree, so it's being lent the attention of ego awareness, or it is cooking or bring on fire by the ego being in dialogue with the inner world. And this tree has fruit, and when the fruit is ripe, when it dies, it's taken to an eternal storehouse, and the resonance of that fruit changes the resonance of every tree that comes or fruit that comes after it. In other words, it actually alters the DNA. And this was kind of what Jung was saying, is that that you can now I'm just saying this only as the puzzle of and Adam, I'd like you to speak with this, and then everybody maybe have a say on it. The puzzle of before we go out and do anything in the outer world. I mean, the rule of all doctors is do no harm. Are we in harmony with the Tao when we do it? And what would that be? What would we consider being in harmony with the Tao before we go out to heal? But Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And unfortunately, I got distracted because Miles shared something very useful also. So I didn't get the whole image of the alchemical tree, which sounded interesting. I don't know if
let me just tell you real quick. It was just there's a burning tree. Okay, that tree bears fruit. That's human beings, and when the fruit is harvested, it's put in the eternal storehouse of lived lives, and the resonance of each life alters the resonance of every fruit that comes afterwards. And so this was sort of a symbol of how the astrological ages develop, and how the God image evolves.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, and what Stuart and Tim are talking about is really relevant to me as well. I actually spoke with an alumnus of Pacifica yesterday morning because I'm in the application process, and she said, from speaking with you intuitively, I just want to ask if having been not in the spiritual community for 6 months is enough time before you plunge into something else. And again, this is very personal, but even with my new life partner, we're having some time apart because we both need, I just need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. It's become evident. At the same time, how can I put this? I wanna meditate and take in what Stuart said, because it's important. It's a message that's being conveyed, and I don't want to just disregard it or something like that. But I do feel like there's something alchemical going on here that maybe taking that image that you just shared, Craig, where this can get dangerous maybe is if I have that maybe savior mentality, think I'm going to change the world, and it's all about me, and it starts to get a little bit, inflated, even as Stuart said. But if I am able to, this sounds so theoretical, but if I'm able to, I just saw a documentary called The Last Shaman about a young man who has a shamanic experience in South America. because he was in such a bad state in his life. The son of two physicians, he wasn't able to be himself. The only thing that he was going to do before he committed suicide was try this last thing, which is do some ayahuasca ceremonies in South America. But he came to the realization, and you could see he had changed by the end of this process. He came to the realization that he was just one point, just one particle in something hugely greater than himself. And it was like, that helped him a lot, you know? So it's like sort of contextualizing somehow this immense, direct, powerful experience, but in a way where it's like, it's not all about you. It's like, I don't know, I kind of feel like I just want to stop talking because I feel like I need to take in what you all think. And that's so important, you know?
Well, you know, one thing that we have to keep in the Jungian approach, you always want to keep the ego self axis, you know, where the ego is basically a vehicle of the dialogue. It's the outer world venue. You had a good word for that, Stuart. It was like it's the outer world venue for the dialogue that the ego is substance which lacks meaning, and the self is meaning which lacks substance. And you know the what is to be created between the ego self-axis, between the two, which is to be the redeeming thing, the redeeming saving thing, is they say about the philosopher's stone that it cannot appear in nature. The ego can't produce it by itself. The self can't produce it by itself. The only way that's the redeeming thing, the golden child, the philosopher's stone, can be produced is through the ego self-axis, and that is through the dialogue between the this outer, very directed type thinking, the very directed type thinking, and then over here you have this mythological thinking, you know, which is all the realm of images. So through the dialogue with directed thinking and with the realm of images, where everything happens instantaneously, if it's a fortuitous dialogue, then the philosopher's stone can come into being. Yes, Stuart.
Right, just on this, the nature of the experience, if we look at that, the nature of a transcendent experience is to transcend us, obviously. So in the transcending of myself, my position, I need to re-experience, if you like, any unfinished business as it gets burnt off. So the last thing to be burnt off is the first thing that happened as we regress back, as we transcend forward, if you like, or upwards. So the sort of tantrum type response of the child and the subservient response of the child, that sort of fighting with, you know, the onset of the heroic instinctual drive in us, and the onset of the subservient being of service, giving myself to the other in a different way. It's a hero of different clothes, if you like. Both of those things need to be looked at. It's like the psychology of the transcendent is different than the psychology of the ego. Now, in looking at the very early stuff, even the perinatal stuff that goes on within us that gives rise to the ego, all of that has to be brought in to be looked at before the person is clear to go out and act. If it's not that they shouldn't or they mustn't or anything like that, but in going out early, what is going to happen inevitably is you're going to set yourself up. Do you see?
Can,
And it doesn't mean, well, that's a bad thing. It just means, well, that's a different type of experience that happens next. That's all. Either way, that unfinished stuff will come back until it's looked at, dealt with, and put aside. So I'd always be saying, give it another month, give it another month, give it another month, and then let it do its own business naturally. But that early stuff is very, very important because different people respond in different ways. And there it is.
can I also say something just very quickly? Yeah, I mean, in all religion, you cannot see God. You know, if you see God, you'll die. Basically, whether you go into Christianity, even Islam, even Prophet Muhammad has, you know, direct revelation of son. It was through, you know, angel Jibril. We call it Jibril, but Gabriel. And but the question is, if you have still unified with the divine without going into psychosis, basically, you still have somewhat your essence are sort of drawn into the sort of this infinite pure consciousness of bliss and ecstasy, if you like, and you come out from that. I mean, that's a very hard thing to do because you are wounded. Basically, your ego is a wounded, and so like Greg said, from a Jungian perspective, is to integrate the experience rather than necessarily go and dive in again. You know, it's to integrate what has just been or what just has happened to the person, and it can only be done so with an intact ego. Otherwise, the sugar, you know, in the coffee totally sort of loses it. And yes, that's perhaps that I want to add. You know, that's why you have angels to connect. You know, you have the angel Gabriel,
the seventh,
Hermes.
yeah. It's the seventh chakra is, you know, the sixth chakra is where you behold the flame, and then the seventh chakra is where the moth flies into the flame. That is beholding. I mean, it's just a sense of dissolution. I mean, we keep talking about death. It's more of a everything is a transformation. Every death implies a rebirth, you know. But that is the sense of Jung said we would never in the West get past the heart chakra, you know, that we weren't capable of going of immolating like a moth, you know. But anyway, why don't we get a little bit from everybody, and then we can talk about. We might want to just talk a little bit about if anybody did any active imaginations this week too. But Adam, we more is to be revealed, I think, as well.
Yeah, well,
I mean, because this is and Tim too. Tim, when was your experience? Was it in what month did it occur?
The very beginning of March.
The very beginning of March of this year. Okay, and
Yeah.
Adams was in October.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was hoping they didn't happen on the same day. Okay, Ivan, did you have any comments on anything?
No.
Okay, you're listening intently with your scientist mind, you know.
I'm finding it really fascinating. I just don't think I have anything of value.
Yeah, I do feel inadequate. Seriously, as you know, one thing that Jeffrey Raff says is that there are winged people who fly up to heaven without any problems. He says, but sometimes they don't integrate very well, but they fly up to heaven very easily without any problems. And then there are the ladder people who can climb up rung by rung, you know, but at least they have an implement to get there, you know. And but it's clumsy carrying around the ladder, and they don't like carrying around the ladder. And then there are the rope people. I'm a rope person who have to do it hand over hand, you know, and it's a long, and I've actually had dreams about this where it's one at a time, you know. But anyway, Sandy, how about you? Do you have any comments?
Thank you, Adam, for sharing. That was
Yes, beautiful.
unbelievable. I mean, it's just, I just taking it all in and really appreciating what you shared and what everyone shared. And I think it's important, and I just appreciate what you shared and what everyone's sharing. So thank you. It's a great learning experience.
Gary, how about you?
Yeah, so, and this isn't mine, but it's a lecture that I watched recently. And the thing that's really interesting about this is, I think there's a lot of question of like, well, okay, you have this, how do you bring it to the outer world and affect large changes? And that was really what this was about. And what they said is that, you need to talk about charisma. And they said, Hollywood actors and stuff, they may have magnetism, they may be attractive, they may have fans, but they don't have charisma. And what charisma is it's a connection to the divine, to the divine inspiration. And then with that, you now need, a group of people, preferably large, who are discontent, because charisma only works with people that are unhappy with something, that are discontent, because otherwise the message will not appeal. But if you have the divine inspiration, and then the group of people that, at some subliminal level are above, are discontent, then the two can link up. And at that point, I think the person with the charisma actually, achieves kind of a archetypal status. And that gets dangerous, because then they have to, they have to realize that they're the channel for the message and not, the message, But if they can maintain the state of being a channel for the message, then, then you can ethically, really, I think, make the type of changes that your heart desires, if you will.
Yeah, well, why don't we hear, we'll hear from Lewis, Miles, and Jan, and then Tim, you finish up, and then Jordy, I'd like you to kind of take the rest of the time to tell us your story. Is that okay?
Up to you. I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. How many of us are science trained or have science background or are involved in the nitty-gritty of dealing with science?
Well, Ivan and Gary are, and Miles,
I don't know.
I mean in hard physical sciences, not social sciences.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
In my case, it's epidemiology. Ivan, what's yours?
Ivan, what was yours? Engineering or?
Yeah, engineering, math.
Yes.
Good.
Engineering and math.
Yeah.
Gary, what were you in?
Computer science.
Computer science. How about you, Miles?
Civil engineering.
Civil engineering. Okay.
Yeah, and I've been IT all my life too.
Oh, IT. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about Lewis, Miles, and Jan? Why don't and finish up, and then Tim, I'd like to hear your response to everything, because let me just say one thing: is everybody's individual path is correct. Alexander Solzhenitsyn always says, it's true. This is what he said when he went into the gulag. It's true when it happens to you. I mean, there's no, Jung said that when he would tell people about his experiences that he'd had, he was reluctant to speak of them. And when he would tell them, they'd say, well, I have not had such experiences. And he says, well, I'm sorry, I have. In other words, it's undeniable. So Lewis, what do you have to say?
Well, it's an interesting fact that generally speaking, you have introverts and you have extroverts. And the one always thinks that the other is beneath them.
True.
And the introvert will stress being with themselves and meditation, whereas the extrovert is out there embracing the so-called outer world. But the fact is they're both essential and equally necessary. There are plenty of extroverts who have never taken a moment to look within themselves, but there's plenty of introverts who have never adapted to the outside world. And while there are times where being alone with yourself is good, if you can't embrace the community of fellow human beings, a lot of what you accomplish on your own will be sterile. Introverts, by and large, look down upon the outside materialism of the world, particularly of the Western world. But the fact is that if you look to the East, China has embraced the atheism of communism and has gone full bore capitalistic. And in India, you still have, while it's a democracy, remnants of the caste system is still alive and well. And within the world of Islam, not only in many countries are women not allowed to drive a car, they may regularly be stoned, or there may be honor burnings. So the ills of materialism is certainly not unique to the so-called Western world. It's present really all over planet Earth. I don't know anywhere where women have equality. And sometimes there are parts of the earth that are still less advanced than the West. And so it would be very interesting one day to have 6 self-avowed introverts and 6 self-avowed extroverts within the same conversation.
Yeah, that would be, that is wonderful, Louis. It is the fact that we're all blind people trying to tell each other what the elephant is, you know, and we're none of us are wrong, but none of us have the full picture, you know. So it isn't, and even though we don't have the full picture, none of us are wrong, you know. But through the voices of all of the people looking at the blind elephant, if you are open, you can start to get a glimpse of what the elephant is looking like. The extroverted existence is somewhat alien to myself, you know, and so I'm walking around thinking I have the entire whole picture, where I'm intensely inadequate as far as that is concerned. Now, Miles, how about you and Jan? And then I'd like to hear maybe just a little bit from Tim and Adam and Stuart, and then Jordy, you have the rest of the time. Is that okay? All right, go ahead, Miles.
Thank you. So I related to Adam on numerous fronts. The interest in the Indigenous wisdom. I'm in Alberta, Canada, and I was laid off about 5 years ago from a job associated with railways, and you know, and even before then, I was on half time with this company because things were not looking very good. So that's the context. Now I thought, all right, I need to get a job, and I appreciate also how it's stressful on the relationships when you're dealing with your cognitive dissonance and your spiritual dissonance. So from my wife's perspective, it's Miles, just get a job, you know, like the Bruce Hornsby song, it has that line in it. However, I'm thinking, well, I've been concerned about existential threats for 45 years, and they're piling up, right? And so I also thought, well, if we're supposed to have a different kind of thinking, like Einstein said, well, what kind of different thinking is there? And I thought of my indigenous neighbors. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and I've made some connections, and they've been profoundly moving, and they've educated me. They've educated me about the Bible. So those are the aspects that I relate to you. I don't get very many job offers, but curiously, since we're talking about our careers or science backgrounds, so just the other day, I get an invitation to apply for a job building the Trans Mountain pipeline, being involved in it, which is a very controversial pipeline here in Canada to take oil sands, tar sands products to Vancouver, British Columbia, right through Indigenous territories. So anyway, I'd connect with that and appreciate it. Thank you.
Jan, could you say a few words, and then I'd like to hear from Tim, and just some brief remarks from Stuart and Adam. We want to leave Jordy some time here, but go ahead, Tim. I mean, Jan.
I think Jan. Oh.
I'm okay with just listening and writing to you guys in this side. I appreciate
All right, sure.
it though.
Okay, sure thing. Well, Tim, why don't you, Tim and Adam and Stuart all say something, and Charles came in a little late, but then we'll kind of give it over to Jordy and let him tell us about his experiences.
Go ahead, Tim. I think Lewis is talking about me. I've always felt like an introvert that couldn't really adapt very well to the outer world. And for a while, you know, I got to be sort of famous, so I got to experience what it's like to be to live sort of an extroverted life. But that's not who I am. And I've spent years and years like in my internal world. And one of the things that's so intriguing about what Stuart is saying is you know, trying to discover the balance for myself of the distinction between the inner and the outer in terms of action. And so, you know, this is a fascinating conversation for me because I feel like we are perched at the edge of the precipice, and every single one of us has some idea that moves humanity forward, even though it's just a tiny increment. You know, it's 1 millimeter for each one of us, but we're all kind of moving a little bit forward. And I'm just thinking about the fact that a generation ago, it seems to me that it wouldn't have been possible for us to have a community conversation about numinous experiences, because back at that time, there was really only psychosis and dogma inside the institutions. And I come from a family where we embraced people who were right on the edge of kind of human functioning. I've just been in dialogue this week with a woman that my parents rescued 50 years ago from suicide many, many times. And she was in a mental institution, and she wrote all kinds of numinous poetry. And there was even among my family no real way of embracing that in a public way. I mean, they could keep encouraging her and saying, "You're going to be fine. You're going to be all right. Whoever you are is okay." But there's no way that she could take that story out into the public or into a community forum like what we have here today. And what that means to me is, yes, we are moving forward. We are making progress, and we still need to move in that direction. And I don't know, frankly, if we are going to evolve fast enough to keep ourselves from going extinct. But that is certainly my hope. And this kind of group is exactly what we need, is more of this kind of dialogue. So thank you, everybody, for participating in this. And I really look forward to more.
Thank you, Tim. Well, why don't Stuart, you go, and then Adam, you kind of just summarize, and then we'll turn it over to Jordy. And hi, Charles. Nice to see. Charles is the greatest dreamer in the whole world. By the way, I want to say one thing. If you think Tim is great, you should meet his brother and sister. They're pretty amazing people. But go.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay. Well, I think it's always, for all of us here, we're all psychologically inclined. You know, we understand the experience somewhat, and we put a lot of our life effort and energy into sort of opening up the view that we can sort of have a more insightful attitude towards what we do next. So in taking all that into account, my best advice to anybody, including myself, in a situation like this, is when I have one of these sort of blowout experiences, is to, usually with the help of somebody else, because it's hard for me to do it on my own, somebody who's familiar with that sort of ground, because not everybody is familiar with that ground, but somebody who has some familiarity with that ground, a good therapist, to look and see what the indicators are that still remain in me. So do we able to get some assistance, some support in settling myself and settling any of the affect that's still hanging around, that I may not be fully aware of within my own habits, so that when I do decide to go back out into the world with this, or for whatever reason, I'm doing so from as stable state of mind, a normalized state of mind as possible for me, because there's always going to be a lot of straggly bits, bits of affect that have stuck in me, and they're causing me to do this or to be blind over there, little blind spots. And it's just extremely useful, because we don't see them for ourselves, and that's a fact. They're blind. We don't catch them. But yet when we go to follow them inwards, they can really, really, really result in something wonderful. The smallest bit of affect can suddenly open up into a whole transformative experience. So that's what I would be suggesting, to be able to work with what's there, and then to go and ask somebody else, well, is there anything else there that I'm not seeing? Because invariably they will pick up something else, and then as that's really it. Do our best.
That's what Jung did, and he eventually found it in Alchemy. I mean, what's the historical antecedents of this? He used to keep a gun in his drawer. This was from his son, said this, that he had a gun in his drawer, and he kept it there because if he went over the edge, he was gonna shoot himself, But so that he was trying very hard to orient himself. He kept telling himself over and over, I'm a psychologist. I live at 228 Seestrasse in Kusnacht. I have a wife and 5 children. I mean, he'd say this over and over again, and so he needed to find a historical antecedent to it, because he was this one in a dream with his father, where they are going to see this guy named Uriah. His father takes and puts his head on the in obeisance on the stone floor, and Jung stops an inch short. I mean, because he was Prometheus, he wanted to keep his 2 feet on the ground. Adam, do you want to just summarize, and then we'll turn it over to Jordy?
Yeah, I guess if to summarize, I would say that I know I shared a lot of profound stuff, and for me, all the reflections that everybody has offered and advice also are extremely valuable. I think probably each of us, you know, is going to process all this stuff in their own way. One thing I wanted to say to sort of, you know, I resonate a little bit with what Stuart is saying, and in that I see like a huge amount of like early stuff in my life coming out that I'm needing to process as a result of, you know, this experience so, you know, but so I'm meditating on that. I guess one question I have is, you know, I think that this group is very good, and maybe this is the only way that it makes sense for us to connect with each other. But I'm also wondering, you know, would it make sense for individuals to converse, you know, outside the group about specific things, or if people feel comfortable with that? It's, you know, I'm not even sure if that would be good, but I feel like there may be opportunities for even collaboration in some ways, you know, on some of this stuff. So.
Tim is doing a lot of work on this. I mean, I never seen anybody as busy as him, you know. One thing Stuart stresses that involved in this experience is dealing with our own grief, you know, that we have to deal with our own grief after we have an experience like this, you know. Jordy, what I thought we'll do is you say some, kind of tell us just whatever you want to talk about. Next,
Can I just interject a quick
yes,
comment?
go ahead, Miles, please.
Just for the recording, you know, because people listening to it might be confused. When I said my encounters with Indigenous people taught me about the Bible, it's that they are exemplary of love, the ones that I've met. You know,
yes.
Maybe akin to Mountain Lake. It's not that they were reading of the Bible to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, and what we'll do next time is we'll keep dealing with these in a Jungian context, you know, because Jeffrey Raff had this experience, but way before he met Jung, and yet he found alchemy and Jungian psychology the bridge towards its strength returns. Its strength is perfected when it returns to the earth. You know, in other words, at the end of the day, we need to walk on the ground with 2 feet, you know. And anyway, Jordy, why don't you just tell us anything you want? We'll start on the Barbara Hanna next time.
Good. Do you listen to me? Do you hear me well?
Yes. Yes, okay. I hear you very good.
Do I have 5 minutes or something like that? About 5 minutes or?
Craig, you're muted.
Okay. Now,
15 minutes. We got 15.
Okay. When I joined the group, they were talking Adam, Stuart, and Tim, and I had the experience almost of saturation of too many materials. Where when you go to a buffet type of restaurant and you fill the plate because everything is appealing, and then you have, oh God, there is too much. And I have to go slowly and carefully because there were, so to speak, quality items there. So I would like to review the video, take notes, and make sense something out of that. Another way of putting the thing, another way of putting or verbalizing the thing, is that we are in a sense of cross-pollination, like the forest with plenty of vegetables and plenty of things going. And there is, in another language, some sort of brainstorming or soul storming with plenty of stimulation. Things resonate, evoke things, but then the dialogue or the dynamics go on. This is normal, and this is a price we have to pay to stay here. Now, talking about myself, this mug, it's 3 storks. I bought it in the city of Strasbourg, which is gifted with plenty of stork nests, and it happens to be my animal name, which is the blue stork.
Yes.
Actually, it's as heraldic figures were the French fighter pilots of First World War, Nangesser, etc. Yes. Which fits me well because I am a flyer. And the first thing after this confinement runs out is to renew my flying license. And I find merit in flying because in a score of 0 to 20, I am 19 introvert.
Me too.
Yeah. So flying, mountaineering, scuba diving, and that type of thing keeps me to the toes and to be in open, silent, innerly silent connection with nature, Mother Nature, or whatever, the elements, which I found it enjoyable and healthy, balancing. In this sense, to have a permanent contact with reality, generally speaking, is, on my experience, is a good thing. Grounding in the sense of Wilhelm Reich or his students, Wilhelm Reich or Alexander Lowen and company. I mean, because if we don't have the feet on our ground, we get the risk of getting lost. Now, I jokingly say that I committed two main mistakes in my life, like the Western movie of Clint Eastwood. Well, the other one was not to kill him. That's not my case. The first mistake was to devote my life in public health when I could have been a good, say, internist or even a surgeon. And the second mistake was to work for government. I was recruited just out from my public health school. That's a joking comment to do at cocktail parties. But it's a life that has been fulfilling, not particularly stressful, and able to develop other things. Now, I am a skeptic by training. It was amazing that this bastard of yours, one of the George Bush, I don't know if he was the vice president of the Minister of Defense or something, who mentioned the unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
that was Donald Rumsfeld, I think.
Who?
Donald Rumsfeld, I remember.
Well,
yeah.
They say one of those bastards. You know?
Yeah.
Now, my life is an experience of unknown unknowns, and that gives me skepticism and prudence. When I was an intern in medical school, I was some sort of research teaching assistant in the hospital. And in my country, medical school is not graduate, it's both undergrad and grad. It's a 6-7 year program. So I did my first postmortem at age 19. And you discover what's paralyzing crying when you have to do a postmortem of a baby of half a year or a mother. And it's an initiating process. It changes your identity and your self-image. And it hardens you. One of the things that we were doing a lot in the early 80s, late 70s, were ulcers. I mean, bleeding in the stomach, etc., something like that. Huh? It was a major issue in all hospitals. That disappears in 1997 when some people made the point that that was an infectious disease. Nobody would have believed them, say, half a year before. It was a change of paradigm. And medicine is something like that. That there are things you don't know, And that connects me to the old esoteric world. I had some synchronicity experiences. As one colleague of mine says, when I want to talk to someone, I try the phone more than telepathy.
Yes.
You want to live in the practical world, but it's not denying the rest. Is that
say that again? I missed that. That last line.
I mean, when I want to talk to someone, I use the phone, and that's not denying telepathy.
When I want advice, I go shut the door and meditate, or that's what somebody said one time.
Yeah. Now, my introduction to, say, the esoteric thing, it happened by chance. That connects me to this moment. There is this corny, if you want, proverb that when the student is right, the teacher appears, or something like that. To me, this group has appeared in the right moment of the game. As the esoteric studies, in my case, was Freemasonry, which I was initiated when I was 35 in 1990. And my wife, we were married, my wife was pregnant with my elder daughter. And I was invited for a variety of reasons, but my reputation was I was a big mouth Voltairean. Frank, with some gift for making puns and making jokes and things like that, and being sharp and being a particularly unbeliever. And then there I discovered something that I value, which is Pythagoras.
Yes, Pythagoras.
The Pythagorean tradition and the power of ritual and the power of being physically connected to ritual, which elevating the symbolic to the acting.
Yes.
When you perambulate and things like that, you are a walking symbol, so to speak. And the power of silence, and many other things. And I discover tarot or astrology or I Ching through the breath and there. I'm not an active member anymore. I've been active for 21 years. But it was a good exposure, orderly exposure, respectful exposure, even to the Western tradition. I include Kabbalah and Christian mysticism and things like that. I gather that not all lodges are equal here. There is a strong variations among lodges, countries, etc. But in my case, it supplied me first experience and then food for thought. In order, first experience and then you think about that. Keeping a baseline skepticism. And then I rediscovered Jung. I did Jung at med school, as Reich, etc. We get to say 4 courses, 4-semester courses on psychiatry and before on psychology. And these matters were covered at some depth. And they reconnect me to that. Now, I make a criticism to Freemasonry and to generally people interested in occult, is that they are more hung up for their fascination than for ability to inquire. So what's going on in a ritual process, say in initiation process? If you type initiation ceremonies in Google, you will find 300, 400 books on what's the right doctrine here from this tradition and the other tradition, but very little teaching what's going on for the human experience. The liminal space, how it's constructed, how the transfer is given from someone to the group, how the structure and the anti-structure. Some anthropologists at Chicago, good one I respect, which is Victor Turner, explain about that. But there is not that much thing that makes sense, and there is plenty of doctrine here. And we have, on my experience, an oversaturation of doctrine and a lack of solid cooking books.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, to make an acceptable omelette, you need some apparel, some kitchen, and some technique, and some eggs. Much more than philosophy of the omelette.
Yes.
Yes. To be over sarcastic. Now,
no.
in my process, I have to prepare to my senecticity, to be old. I am 65, and what I've done, my chores in life, like raising a family, making some savings, writing a couple of books, organizing a professional society, blah, 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 that's already been done. So what's next for me? It's up to me to discover or to open to get it revealed. Even if I live 1 month more or 10 more years. And here I am. Now, generally speaking, I don't like, and that's my Reichian tradition. When I got divorced, I asked for the help of a counselor, and I didn't want someone that's particularly psychodynamics. I don't want, using a Spanish expression, you lose your force through the speaking. I don't know if how that's said in English. I wanted something more direct and to check myself in. And I found someone who has been a student of Alexander Lowen, which was a gift in my case. It was half a year to keep myself on my toes and rediscover the importance of getting around at identifying how well you dress your own body here. And getting things out, interacting, willing and dealing with the fucking world all the fucking time.
Yes.
But if you sit down, you get fat. In a way, that has been me useful and has increased my skepticism to the overvalue mental intellectual activities, which, by the way, I have a natural inclination, and I am particularly gifted for all sorts of brainy things. So it has remedial properties in my case. Now, what can be my contribution here? I don't know. I'll try to behave and to focus myself to be effective, of course, but
please don't behave.
But
yeah. Please don't behave, he said. I feel like we have Zorba the Greek here, and that you'll be like Hermes. You're going to be a very good Hermes.
This beer has a story. I have been shaven for almost all my life, but I joined a Vipassana retreat the 26th of February, which lasted to March 9 or March 10 for veteran students. You know, these things of sitting 12 hours a day, etc., with
yes.
no silence. I tried Zen, but Vipassana is more hippies. It suits me better. I have the intuition that the Zen is more for military ninja types who have a perfectly healthy relation with the inner assassin or something like that. For people more hippies, there are, say, softer approaches to meditation. Now, I grew a little bit of beer during the retreat. I got sick after coming back home. I took sick leave for 3 or 4 days, and then we will confine. So here we are. I will cut the beard when the deconfinement appears. My daughter-in-law said that your life, but that's a frivolous comment. Now, I am not a born patriarch. I am, by inclination, I am, a government anarchist. And if you ask if we have connection to the deep state, I will say no. I will deny.
Yes.
But I am the only civilian in Spain who had the wings of flight surgeon. Yes. I am a full qualified Air Force flight surgeon. So I know the inner dealings of government, and I am, say, a prudent anarchist here. Mm-hmm. Like Tolkien, the power, the less, the more spread, the better for everyone.
Yes.
And
yes, the Taoist king who goes out and to ask the subjects how the king, what they think of the king, and they say, "We didn't know there was a king," and then he goes back to the palace happy.
Yeah, that sort of thing. When you look to the things closely, they are much more freaky and strange than they appear. So to keep some distance normally is healthy. Yeah. And I discovered that in the emergency room when I was an emergency room intern. Mm-hmm. When you're very close to your fellow interns or nurses or residents, etc., they're a big bunch of crazy freaks. And you don't want to know that detail. Mm-hmm. And patients are freak, and mothers of patients are freaky people, and you don't want them too close. That's my piece of wisdom. Are you sure you want to know people that well? On my experience, well, with moderation. I mean, yes. Distance management makes things much more manageable.
Yes.
Said that, I want to make another statement. I would like to meet all 10 of you in person at some point of my life, if that's feasible.
Yes. Okay. Certainly.
that's my policy in social networks. I don't want friendship in Facebook, so something like that. 2-in-1, I don't want to meet it in person.
You never know. That's
Yeah.
what, there's this wonderful story of Jung said one time that the best analog to himself was a Hasidic rabbi named the Maggid of Mezerich. And one person went to see the Maggid of Mezerich, Poland, one time. And when he returned, everybody said, well, what did the Maggid preach? And he says, I didn't go there to watch him preach. I went there to watch him lace up his boots. You know, he just wanted to see him and see the man, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see fully the
yeah.
point.
Well, Sandy, did you have something? No, okay.
No, listening.
All right. Well, I was just going to say next time what we'll do is you know, the second exercise in ally work is on pretending. Now, I've been using that all week in my active imaginations. That means I go down and I'm every actor in the play. I'm the setting. I'm the trees. I'm everything, and I'm trying to lend my awareness to all of them. You're practicing the practice of developing an organ of perception in the unconscious or in the inner world. This is the object of the early stages of active imagination, is to develop the organ of perception of a seeing but not an understanding. You want to see but not understand. Then the fifth one is to view the light of Poimander. I mean, you want to have some being reveal his essence to you, you know, while you occupy his awareness. Go ahead, Jordy.
Again?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's something. Did you do this last week? Yeah, I'm just saying next week, if you want to do one other one, it's the sixth one, which is to take your active imagination out into the outer world. Whenever I am done, I ask these figures, be with me out here, you know, and I try to carry that zoom of the active imagination in my head. What Marie-Louise von Franz told Jeffrey Raff was that an individuated being who is one who's in active imagination all the time. You know, in other words, personality number 2 is operating with them as they go out in the world. So yes, I mean, I would say what I'm doing, Jordy, is I do this same one, but I'm trying to apply at least those 3 lessons in each one, and it's not necessarily focused on it, but it's just to apply them. And I've had a wonderful week, and I'll tell you, I mean, I'd like everybody to report on their active imaginations, any insights they had. Like one where I go into the river, not me, but another figure, and then that figure becomes the river, and there's just one, the river and that inner personage are experiencing each other while I'm experiencing them experiencing each other. But anyway, we'll just go through those. Go ahead, Jordy.
I need what you will call an active imagination remedial book for retarded dummies.
Okay, now I am going to give you one. What I'm thinking the next book that we're going to do is...
I insist retarded dummies.
Yes, and I'll discuss this. I mean, the best thing I think a group like this has is to share the difficulties. All I see is darkness. All I hear is my own voice rattling around inside my head. You know, how is this active imagination? How do you break that spell and break through it to actually have this inner dialogue? But I have a book, it's by Joan Chodreau, and I thought that would be the next one we do, where she has a wonderful introduction to active imagination. And then we go through every work that Jung did on active imagination. One is from Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Confrontation with the Unconscious. Another is the transcendent function, and then one from 2 essays. And I mean, and so it's kind of a one for dummies, but the beginning of it is really good. And plus we'll talk about it. And I think rather than reading it in a book, it'd be nice to hear our own struggles.
Yeah.
What struggles we're having with it, because I've had plenty of struggles. And you know, I'm a rope person. I think Adam and Stuart are winged people, and maybe a few of you are ladder. I think Charles and Sandy are ladder people. But anyway,
I'm definitely a winged person.
okay, you're a winged person. He's got more unconscious contents than he knows what to deal with. Then we'll also go through the case of Edward, and I think the thing we want to focus on is the characters in the case of Edward, because there's four anima figures. There's also the Kabiri hunchback, who is the creative force, you know. Then we also have two shadows, the veiled boatman and the devil. And then there is actually the self there, who interestingly is this is the god of Edward, is the eyes of fire, ice, water, and wind. So that's his god, is the eyes of fire, ice, water, and wind. You know, and that's a very interesting thing. And then of course Four Eyes, who is this anima who doesn't care if Edward lives or dies. And, you know, she has to be convinced that who cares about Edward? He's the one that got us into this mess, you know. And then there's the finally, we'll look at the eternal feminine in its elemental feminine and the transformative feminine, because the woman at the end with the 4 breasts who appears would be the good mother, who's in the elemental feminine, and then the witch is the negative elemental feminine, and then there is the transformative anima, who is the guide, and then there is also this very interesting Four Eyes, you know. So anyway, we'll go through the case. We'll want to hear everybody's struggles with active imagination. And I'm saying all through this, we'll use Jeffrey Raff as kind of the guide for active imagination, and just continually have assignments. But we'll also go through almost every book there is on active imagination. Go ahead, Jordy.
Does it make sense to keep a diary on that?
Okay. Yes. My
experiences with diaries.
Yes.
They can be a source of baggage at some point.
Well, okay, but yes, but you can also review them and take these things and make them concrete and real in the outer world. One thing I've discovered is if you have an active imagination and something happens in it, you need to, through relentless memory, make this a part of your personal myth. You need to take that image, whatever it was, and make it real and concrete in the outer world. Otherwise, you're not really integrating with it, and you're just letting it flow by in the stream, and it's lost to transforming ourselves. What do you think about that, Jordy? Does that answer? Is that address what you're talking about? Because I love your epidemiology approach here.
No, the thing is that observing myself, I end up spending more time of breaking things than doing things.
Yes. Well, okay, yeah, there is you're talking about the systole and diastole. You know, at one point you need to turn in, and the other point you need to embrace the whole world, but you need to have a balance.
It's an issue of anxiety management. It's more relaxing to think about things and ordering with words than to jump to the swimming pool and getting wet.
Yes.
And in this sense, any trick to jump into the swimming pool, some entrance and exiting rituals, something that may work.
Mm-hmm. Well, the whole object of this whole thing is to develop the organ of seeing in the inner world. And you know, that's what we're trying to work on, so that these we're lending our awareness to these figures, these living figures in the inner world, and so that that we can have the ego self-access, the tension between the inner and the outer world, and let something be born, you know, let the egg form. But anyway, so next week we'll concentrate on, let's just talk about our struggles with active imagination. We have a couple of guides, or 3 guides, from which would be 2, 5, and 6 from ally work, and then we'll go through the case of Edward, concentrating on these figures in the inner world, which pretty much gives us an example of each. Plus, Edward's case is very interesting, and the fact that this active imagination took 18 months, and it was on one dream, you know. And so we read this and we think, wow, I wish I had experiences like that. That was 18 months of work, of maybe an hour each day for, you know, almost 500 days. Anyway, anyone have any closing wisdom? And then we'll.
I did want to say one thing.
Yes, Charles.
There's probably a few people here that don't really know me, but I am active person in the Friday night dream analysis. But after hearing some people today, it sounds like we're going to have some sort of conference or something.
Yes. Well, the cross-pollination is lovely, you know. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're cross-pollinating, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see something like that happen. Also, the idea of contacting each other outside of the group, you know.
Yes.
For me, I've been leaning more and more towards that because I need so much help with my dreams, because they're just like, it's just an endless pile that I can't manage by myself, honestly.
Well, I think everyone here is on our email list, I believe. So if you want to contact anyone individually, you're certainly welcome to. And this is, you know, I'm going to sort of provide a structure, but this is just, we're learning from each other. And I'm telling you, I'm not the, I don't pretend that the gates of paradise have never opened for me yet. But I'll tell you, this last week when I was working on what we were going to do, I had some incredible experiences. So I think the more hours you spend in your active imagination trance, the better, the more productive the whole experience becomes. Did you have something to say, Miles? You look like you're, and I think Kevin.
Oh, no, I'm just trying to catch all this great stuff.
Oh, okay.
Dan has put up, and so I'm using my finger up there. So thank you.
Is anyone else pregnant with comments before we close?
Well, I'm going to throw just one thing out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think in a way it's a little bit directed towards Jordy, because, you know, especially when, you know, when you've got so much experience, like always using the intellect, always, you know, researching things and heavy science, you know, I think what we find is that, you know, for your inferior function, and this is what Jung said, you know, yes, you've got to work with the inferior function and develop it. And so you know, the thing that we should maybe research, and, you know, I certainly don't have the answers here, but I do some things for this when I'm working on my inferior function and active imagination, is how to bring you know, use our inferior function along with the active imagination, is I guess what I'm thinking, because, you know, we have something that's so undeveloped, and, you know, it would be foolish to think that that isn't holding other things back. But there isn't a synchronicity.
It's the blind spot. It's the fourth one that's always missing in Ivan's dreams. Ivan always has a dream of 4 people and one guy's always missing, or one person is always missing. Well, that one holds the key to the gate, you know. Well, now, Kevin, did you have a closing comment, and then we can kind of end?
Yeah, I can just say something like, just quickly, it just came up my mind basically, is that, yeah, the search for wholeness through the Jungian approach is to develop the 4 cognitive functions.
Yeah.
The 4 cognitive function is also the tool to dissect the reality as such. So you just end up with many questions, and there is some truth to the inferior function, obviously, to as a gateway to the unconscious. That's the left side. Now you can say the right side of it, but the left side of it is what I also which I think it's the Maharashi, and so yeah, sort of do Jungian approach, you know, trying to find wholeness through your cognitive means, but also do the other side, which is a direct approach, and do both of them, because the other side you can experience wholeness directly, straightforward, without having to dissect anything. And so do both. Like, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, the dreams always tell me the ego can't help me now, you know, that I'm lost, I'm trapped, there's no way out, you know, so what do I do now? And that is really the key to wisdom. Go ahead, majority.
Well, I object to the term ego.
Yes. Okay. The ego can't help me now. I mean, the conscious attitude can't help me now. Put it that way. The dominant conscious attitude is not the way to wholeness. What do you say about that?
No, I agree, but I mean the semantics of the word ego, to me, systematically confounding.
Is it, how about this? The awareness that has evolved out of our bodies and now no longer is connected to nature at all. That awareness within us that is willful and yet very separated from the original body, or that it's separated out, and now it's that falcon that can't hear the falconer that's winding around it.
And I had something.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jordy. Why don't you finish your comment, and then Kevin. Yeah.
Well, that could be matter for a 5-hour type of discussion.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Why don't we table that? How about you, Kevin? And then Tim, why don't you close?
Just say one word. Like, the ego exists, but it also does not exist. Yes. It depends how. It's like a microscope, you know. How far in do you want to see? If you just want to see from above, there is an ego. If you want to really dive in, then we don't really. That's a different story. But like, it's a 5 hours.
It's the willful attitude that is the broken aspect of the human being, because they're not whole. That's the thing. Tim, did you want to just close, because you're
well, I'm just thrilled with this whole thing, and I haven't been reading the chat, but I made a copy of that because there's a lot of stuff going on there. It just feels to me like Charles said, we need a conference. You know, there's so many good ideas coming out of this, and I just really feel like the energy is very intense, and we're really in the center of something really important. Yes. So thanks everybody, and
okay, great. And we'll focus next time on actual, you know, trying to learn on a more structured basis, but sharing our struggles. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and Adam, particularly, and Jordy, and everyone here. Thank you. I'm so grateful to everybody. We'll see you next time.
You guys. Goodbye.
Okay. Blessings to all of you. Bye-bye.